Welcome to Breakaway, the minor hockey podcast brought to you by the OMHA. I'm your host, Aaron Wilbur, founder of the Coaches site. As always, I'm joined by Ian Taylor, Executive Director of the Ontario Minor Hockey Association. And today, we've got a very special guest. Michael Dundas, the OMHA's Manager of Hockey Development, is going to be joining us. And we've got a great topic today. We're going to be talking about player evaluations, which potentially might be the most polarizing topic in a minor hockey season. Certainly there's probably more cooks in the kitchen on this topic than anything else. Ian, would you agree?
For sure. And especially, again, coming out of our kind of two COVID seasons, we're back to a normal setup. As we've talked about, we're running our player evaluations, our tryouts, both in the spring and in the fall this year. So older players at the older age groups and younger players, U12 and below, happening through September now. So is it polarizing? Yeah, you bet it is. And as you guys both know, there's ways to make the process easier. You're never going to make everyone happy. But I think there is a way to, again, make it smoother, maybe, than maybe it turns out.
No, I think that's great. And so, Michael, maybe just give us the update on the early returns on the fall player evaluations that you've been rolling out.
We're about a week in, so we haven't had a ton of return. It depends who you ask and where they're at in the evaluation process, if it's a positive or negative. But I think we've had good response, and the slow return or slow release back into the season, getting kids back on the ice before evaluations, getting their feet under them, and then having the opportunity to try out or be evaluated by their association has been well received for the most part, I think.
Just, Mike, talk a little bit about that first week back. So we had, we're back after Labor Day. Kids are starting school, and we're not we're not putting them in a tryout, stressful tryout environment. First day of school, right after Labor Day, after they got back from holidays. Just talk about that runway with the prep skates before we hit the actual formal evaluation.
Yeah, it's I guess a little more comfortable ease in approach to hockey, whereas in the past you end your season, whether it was a successful win at the end of the season or you bounced out of the playoffs early, and you're right into evaluations and the stress is high and what's going to happen. You have your summer, you could focus a little on yourself and then you move into hockey, but it's in a situation where it's just about getting your feet going, getting your hands going, feeling good about the game. It's almost like a lengthened, big, deep breath and an exhale before you get into those evaluations. It allows associations to get their feet under them. I think it's a positive. Wear off the rust and in a situation where you're not under the microscope.
No, and I'll add, I think just to provide some perspective. So, out here in British Columbia, particularly due to lack of ice in the city, we have associations start tryouts mid to late August, right. And they chew up that last bit of summer. And it's tough on the kids, but it's also tough on families. And then alternatively, Ian, you and I were talking. I was down in Minneapolis last weekend at a Minnesota hockey event. I was shocked. They don't start their minor hockey player evaluations till early to mid October. And I don't know about you. I would be scratching up the walls at this time of year if hockey wasn't starting. So I think kind of where the OMHA has landed, at least from my perspective, kind of feels like the sweet spot and the right spot to get the hockey season rolling.
Yeah, and I would say the time after Labor Day, it's crazy. You're wrapping up your summer, you're ending your summer sports, you're into school. Sometimes, a player is into a new school. Maybe they're going from elementary school to high school. There's a lot of there's a lot of stress already thrown onto their plate, and it gives them, at least a week to deal with that and then focus, reset and focus on hockey and settle in for the winter. So I think it's a net positive.
Yeah, I think the other part that connects to what you're talking about in Minnesota, Aaron, is then after we get through player evaluations, teams are formed. We've got this period of time, and it's going to be anywhere from what, like 3 weeks. I guess depends. It's basically to the end of the month, where again, teams are going to have a chance to practice. They're going to have a chance to play some exhibition games, and then tournament play can start right at the end of the month, and then regular season play can start. I guess it's end of September, beginning of October. So there is a runway there, and I think that to me is the biggest benefit. Mike and I coached together, and probably the best season we had as far as a startup was U18. It was midget at the time, but now U18, and just the nature of U18, it tends to start a little later, whether it's players at junior camps, whether it's just kind of that trickle down. So it just seems to start later, confirming how many teams there's going to be. And so we ultimately had this development phase before there was a formal development phase. And we enjoyed it, gave us a chance to get everyone going. We played some exhibition games, targeted exhibition games. We didn't even go into a tournament. So teams we knew we would have, some good competition against. And then, Mike, I'm sure we didn't start our regular season. It was at least the beginning of October, and it might have been the second week now that I think about it.
I think our first game was Thanksgiving weekend. And I mean, for us, it was, it's always a rush to get into competition for us. Like, it was always like you had your evaluations, your team was set over the summer, and then like August hit and it was like, okay, how fast can we get into games? How fast can we get into regular season? And now that pressured and rush to get into competition is away. It allows coaches to focus on their team, get into some team building and culture activities so that, they're really creating a foundation of their season with this new format. So I think, again, it does allow players, coaches, associations to really settle into the season and it not just be a rush of chaos. And then, the spring's here and we're all doing the administrative stuff and resetting all over again.
It's Aaron, it's funny. It's funny when you talk to people. So for us, this was our normal, right? So I'm going to throw something at you. So we would have, if you normally would start up right after Labor Day, and whether you picked your team in the spring, even if you had, but you're back on the ice. The biggest weekend of early bird tournaments was the first weekend in September after Labor Day. So that means you went back to school on Tuesday, and that Friday of the same week, you were taking that Friday off to go to a hockey tournament. That was the biggest early bird weekend of the season. So that was normal to us. Now I want your reaction to that when you hear that.
So two things. One, the concept of running tryouts in the springtime,
right,
makes no sense to me. And I think that anybody, I give you an example. So my little guy, he's 4 in November, but he started soccer last night, and he's in the U6 league. So there's kids so he's the youngest, 4 in November. Some of the kids just tower over him. Like, the difference of where he's going to be, or all these kids are going to be in like 5 months, it's huge. And I think to put that on kids, again, I mean, you would. I don't know another example in sports where we don't select or do player evaluations, right up against the season. I think to provide the most equitable opportunity for every player to show their best. So that's one. Two, I think we forget that one. I mean, you can just if you're walking into a hockey arena right now, you can feel it. It's not just about the hockey. When Mike talks about that chaos, like, people are like getting their kids back to school, multiple kids in most cases back to school. For a lot of people, they've had holidays, so their work's super busy. And then you've got kids. And I think that we forget the best part about this for kids is to go to class, meet their pals, hang out, and catch up. And the best part about going to hockey, no offense to the, whatever hot shot drill you're rolling out, it's to get in the dressing room and hang out with their buddies and make their friends and ease into it. So I think that I don't know, out here in BC, it's Thanksgiving weekend's our icebreaker weekend. Like that's probably the biggest travel weekend, at least provincially, when it comes to hockey. And that just, again, I'm biased because it's what I've grown up with. It's what I've been around my whole life. But that sort of 5-week runway to get to that point and let everybody get settled seems like a really good.
I think that you know, I think, what is it, Mike? September 30th.
September 29th is the final date of development phase.
Yeah, so tournaments can start on the 30th and regular season after that. So I think that's going to be a big weekend. So it's pushed back, which is cool. And then we, you know, we're still going to have Thanksgiving, you know, weekend tournaments and all that. So then it'll just be, you know, it'll be regular from that point on. But yeah, it's you know, it's interesting when you talk about, you know, all the other stuff going on, but you know, you can go into the rink during tryout time and again, evaluation time. The tension's palpable, right? Like it's like, you can feel it. So there's a lot going on. Yeah.
No, there is for sure. I'll just add, like, it's a Thanksgiving tradition out here in BC that, you know, you call your family on Sunday afternoon and tell them you're not going to make Thanksgiving dinner because your kid made the semifinal and there's going to be lots of leftovers, and that's how we do it. But so I would say, so, you know, when you look at a minor hockey organization, there's, you know, a multitude of things that need to happen throughout a season. They're all extremely important, but where do you rank the player evaluation process and just having a process and making sure that that's clear to everybody involved? Where does that rank in importance of all the stuff an association has to do? And Mike, I'll throw to you.
You know, I think it would depend who you ask within the association for sure. You know, from an outside non-like hockey association person, I would probably say it ranks as number one, just at the fact that once evaluations are done, everything else kind of falls into place. You got, you know, your team sponsorship, team like staff, you have apparel, all that, everything registration, all that kind of starts to fall into place. And, you know, rightly or wrongly, evaluations being at the top of the mountain, it might not need to be, but I think it's one of the top 3 things that associations focus on. Now, on the process side, I think there's associations that do a great job of streamlining the process for their coaches and making that process consistent on all levels and age groups. And then there's others that leave it to the coaches, and it's different. And I think, you know, transparency and consistency is one of the biggest things that needs to get kind of improved on the evaluation side and process, just because society's becoming so feedback oriented, and the need to have that, you know, understanding of what's going on and what's happening and what's the direction and scheduling. I know Ian and I talk about it all the time, at how regimented families are when you look at a monthly calendar, and they're programmed from 8 a.m. in the morning to 8 p.m. at night. So having an understanding of that process and what's going to go on and what's going to take place and what are the steps through that process is extremely important.
And Aaron, I think without question, you're gonna again, you know, we'll talk about, there's always going to be disappointment if someone doesn't make a team they're wanting to make, and there's a way to manage that. But I think before you even get to that point, communicating what the process is, talking about, you know, what your program is going to be about. That was something Mike and I talked a lot about as coaches was, you know, we put together a program that we felt was pretty intensive and you know, required a certain amount of commitment, and we were getting older at AA. And some players, and we told families, this is going to be our expectation. And we actually had some players say, you know what, you know, they chose to play A, for example, because it was just a little less, intensive a program, just time commitment wise. So sure. You know, and we would rather know that ahead of time as coaches, and they would rather know that ahead of time as you know, as being part of the team, because you don't want to get to November and say, oh, we have another practice, or, you know, can we get some time away, or, you know, so now we're working towards different goals. Right. So that was huge to us. But Aaron, we were talking about pathways last week. And part of the pathways now also provide a guideline in terms of players getting 3 sessions. They get 3 sessions before they can be released, reassigned down to the next level, whatever the case may be. And so that gives one some structure. It gives you the idea that you're not kind of one and done, especially if you didn't have a great skate your first time out. But maybe Mike can talk a little bit about the structure of those 3, because this to me is the way the pathways have been set up. This fits right into that communication process of the parents. We're going to run 3 sessions. Here's how they're going to look. We're going to be looking at, making, some selections maybe at this point, or, so then people go in, okay, they know what's coming at them. But Mike, maybe you can talk about that setup.
No, like you said, there's 3 sessions. Like, players should expect to have the opportunity to skate 3 times in an evaluation period at their association. They should have that opportunity, and the pathways really formalize what that looks like. And you're gonna have a skill session, skill development session focused just solely on individual and skills, and then you're going to have more of a small area game session where you can get into your compete battles and those kind of situations and game like scenarios, and then you can have that formal game. I know as coaches, a lot of coaches like to have an exhibition game as part of their evaluation process to see who the gamers are, and see what happens when you actually get into some competition against someone that's not necessarily maybe your buddy or someone you've grown up playing with. So how does that change what you look like on the ice and how you might fit into their team dynamic? So it's formalized that process, and given, a scenario where you're going to get 3 different looks in 3 very different situations as a player and an athlete. So families will be aware of that. Now, will that change from everyone? What drills are used, or what games they play, or how they set up the ice, or set up their tryout process? Yeah, it'll be a little different, but at least there's some consistency now across the OMHA and how you are going to be evaluated as a player at the level you desire to play at.
Well, I want to go back to a comment that Ian made about the importance of communication. So I think through this process, there's 2 conversations. There's the conversation to the membership or the parents about how the process is going to go, and then you've got the conversation with the coaches,
right,
and evaluators for how they're going to evaluate. How consistent do you think that those conversations need to be, just in terms of getting all the adults in the room on the same page? If this is how it's going to be rolled out, and this is how, specifically, this is how we're going to evaluate our players. Because, I'll give you an example. Like, I just took part as an evaluator with an association out here, and then the way it was structured was like skating 1 to 5, puck handling 1 to 5, and I'm like, okay, well, that's great, but how Ian views skating might be totally different than how I view skating. And,
right.
And if you don't have those details, then it can get confusing. So maybe just go back, let's start with the communication part. How much is that message to each group? How aligned should that be?
I think it should be like within an association. I definitely think it should be consistent. It just is going to, breed association success if everyone's on the same page, everyone's pulling in the same direction, especially with, when you get into season, players, if they have to move up to support a team as an affiliate, they're going to fit within that structure or in that dynamic because everyone's evaluated based on the similar criteria in that scenario. I think it's imperative. If it's not, that's when the questions arise. Well, this coach said this, and I'm here at this, and now you're saying this, and it doesn't even add up because one told me I don't compete hard enough, and you don't like to get into the corners. And the other one said my skating is not that great, but I work hard and I battle. Like, the messaging just becomes unclear and muddy, and that's where frustration arises at the evaluation process. And that's where you have to have those conversations. So I think if there's consistency in the message and coaches are working together, at least the process will be transparent to the families and the player. And at the end of the day, whether the player makes the team or moves on and goes plays with another team or plays at another level lower than that team that they were hoping to make, they at least have some kind of feedback and criteria that they can work on and become better. And if their goal is next year, you know what, I'm going to make that team, but I have X, Y, and Z that I can improve on with my team and work on that to make it my end goal. So
the Coaches Site is a proud partner of the OMHA, along with many of the top development organizations in the world. The Coaches Site was created to provide hockey's top coaches, leaders, and performance experts with a platform to share their experience and insights with amateur coaches and minor hockey organizations, with the goal of enhancing the development opportunity for all players. A membership includes access to 500 hours of educational videos, a library of over 700 drills, articles breaking down the latest tactics and systems, and our newly released Initiation Skills Series, which provides a video-based development curriculum for the first 3 years of a player's minor hockey career. Regardless of the level you coach, the Coaches Site is going to provide you the ultimate coaching toolkit. Listeners of the Breakaway podcast can save 25% off an annual membership by using the code OMHA when they register. Again, use the code OMHA and get registered today.
The communication, not only on that criteria, but I also think just overall, like especially where you've got associations where there's more than one team at an age division, right? So where, you know, one team's going to be selecting their 17 kids or whatever that number is, and then again, kind of reassigning players who don't make that team, you know, to the next team. So whether that's a, you know, AA to A or whatever situation it is. But again, I think it's crucial that there's that communication between that group is open and consistent, and they know what each other's doing. I think there's also, there's two key areas for me. One is, there's always a soft landing for a player who doesn't make one team, but they're kind of handed off to the other team, So I think that can really ease that situation. I think I think that shows to the player and to the parents that there is some continuity because you're working together. So I mean, I think that's huge, but philosophically, I can tell you, I always had the approach that you had to take care of the age group, not just your team, and that's something I know we try and encourage all the time because ultimately someone's going to move out of town or someone's going to, grow or someone's, going to specialize in whatever, something else. And so there's going to be player movement, so I think as long as if we treat the whole age group and create, probably like a deep as a pool as possible, then the players can find their water level. Right. And some will be early, some will be later. But that was always the way, that I kind of looked at it. Like we have a responsibility for the age group and not get siloed, kind of what we were talking about previously.
Yeah. No, I think that's so well said. I'll just add, I think that, the best thing that all of us can do through this process is to make sure that every kid, regardless of what team that they end up on, they feel like the philosophy from the association and the coaches, it's going to be consistent. Like I'm on the same track, I'm on the same plan as the kids and the team above me. Right. Now, the execution might be a little bit different, but sure, I'm on that same plan and I'm not missing out on anything, depending where I land.
Totally.
And I would also add, I think from an association perspective, there is no time in the season when you're going to have parents' attention to talk about any multitude of things, to drive home any points that you will when you do that meeting about how the player evaluations are going to go. So it's a great opportunity for administrators to kind of weave in any sort of messaging, be it around conduct or volunteerism or whatever. This is where you plant that seed. And I also think that how you structure the evaluations, that's really going to inform your development philosophy. So if you want to be an association that says, hey, we value skill and we value playmaking ability, well, then great. Then communicate that. Say, this is how we're going to evaluate these players. Our skill session is going to be focused on skating and puck handling. And when we get into the scrimmages, we're looking for kids that can find open ice. Like, I think we should be a little bit more granular. And then pretty soon, guess what? Everybody's speaking the same language.
Right.
And it's really going to inform, I think, the philosophy of your association, which is important.
I love it.
And yeah,
I do.
So, Michael, now there was a day, I kind of feel like this is more on mine and Ian's day, maybe not so much yours, but like this is where, like, if Ian and I were doing evaluations, we'd have our pencil sharpeners out and we'd have like a legal pad, and probably we wouldn't have an Excel spreadsheet, and we'd be drawing up all the names. But you're I don't know, you're probably a Gen X or a Gen Z. What are your thoughts on like software and some different tools we can use to run player evaluations more efficiently?
I mean, technology's in the game. What can I say? Like it's future of the future, but it's also like very big into sports. You can see it everywhere. Even just if you're watching hockey on a Tuesday night, technology is everywhere. And I think one, it formalizes the process so that, the association has a bit of, I don't like the word control, but like there is some concreteness or structure to how that evaluation process is going to work. It's going to go and help you, Aaron, you said it, like, how do you evaluate skating 1 to 5 versus how does the coach next to you evaluate skating 1 to 5? You can really build in those parameters into those tools so that the feedback and the consistency of an evaluation is in place. It allows you to share. It allows coaches to, focus more on what is happening on the ice than, scribbling down. And actually, that was the biggest thing when I was growing up, is like, you knew, like, what was a coach doing when you were up or you had just finished a shift at a tryout? If they were scribbling, you were like, okay, I must have done something okay, or what did I mess up? Like, it was one of the two. You knew they were busy and they had paid attention, right? Like, and then the flip side of that is the parent that says the parent never even looked at us. But then you can say, here's everything we have, and it's easy to share. You don't have to get into your notes and your chicken scratch. So, we have a great partner in Team Genius that's like formalizing evaluations, player evaluations, and it doesn't just start and finish at the evaluation time. It allows you to show the players development progress through a season. You can say this is your baseline at evaluations, or maybe you set your baseline after the evaluation in your team structure, but then you can carry it right through to the end of the season. And, you kind of have, I don't want to say a report card, but you have a map at the end of the season of what you were successful at, what you really improved on, what you still areas you need to work on before next evaluations. And now with the fall format, you have that ability to go back and work on that stuff and get ready for the next season. And coaches have an understanding of where you are at and how you've developed, and, that you are engaged throughout the season. So I think technology is hugely beneficial to this process, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. But and I think coaches are going to rely on it. And like I said, it allows coaches to share.
Yeah, I'll give you a bit of an example here. So when I started my role as a hockey director, it was probably May or June, and we started preparing for the player evaluations. And some of my staff who had been around for a while said, you need to talk to your family. Like, you're not going to be home in September. And I was like, why not? And they're like, because we don't get out of here till like 2 a.m. like every single night, because we got to, of course, take all the scores, et cetera, and pump them into spreadsheets. And it's like, it is the entire month of September. And I'm like, what? That doesn't sound like too much fun. So we used, in our case, we used Team Genius. And so a couple of things it did. One, it cut down on the work because it automated everything. Two, it allowed us to get a bit more granular in the evaluation. So if we use skating, for example, it wasn't just a score in skating. We said, okay, there's edge work, there's stride, there's turns, there's stops and starts. So now what that did is, when we evaluated all those minor criteria, one, we communicated that to the parents. So the parents are like, oh, well, I thought my kid was a good skater because he went really fast goal line to goal line. Turns out there's a bit more to it than that. So that's good information for me to know. Two, when it came to the player releases, it was a lot easier to pinpoint where that player could improve. So the feedback, I think, was a lot more valuable versus telling a 10-year-old, it's like, your puck skills need to improve. And the kid's like, oh, okay, well, like what? Like, what do I need to do? So it helped out with that. And probably the most important is when there might be some, there might be some negative feedback on the results, be it from a parent. It allowed you to show the parent and say, hey, here's a graph. Here's the baseline. Here's where your son was, or there was 100 kids in the tryouts, and they're like, hey, it's not me. It's not me. It's not personal. This is just black and white where your child landed. And here's the areas that would have helped them move up a little bit. So here's, crystal clear, black and white. Here's the areas you can improve on. And it just added so much transparency to the process. And as you know, like that month of September, your bandwidth can get sucked up with parent meetings, or it can get focused on the players. And I think the use of technology really allows the focus and spotlight to go to the players where it should be.
I have a thought. I mean, like for us, Ian made a great point about a soft landing with players, and when they move, maybe they go from a AAA to a AA. But I think it also allows coaches to share and understand. Like time, like you said, time is valuable.
Yeah,
it's a lot. Hockey season's long. Coaches should be trying to get to at least like all the evaluations that happen before their team's evaluations happen. But life happens, so it allows a coach to get feedback on a process that's happening even if they aren't able to be there, right? Like,
yeah.
Or the same thing, like you said, if there is some negative feelings about something and the association needs to jump in, they are already aware of the process. They can speak to it. They don't have to come to the coach and say, explain your process to me. Why, how did this happen? How did we get there? It is very clear all the way through. And, at the top of the tree, the association and their, leadership group, they can set those parameters so that it's consistent. And you said, a family knows where they'll fit within that dynamic right away, because the data, the numbers are there, the data's there.
No,
100%.
Aaron, I got a question for you because I'm curious on this, and because quite honestly, well, I'll use the word I'm guilty of this. I'm not sure that means it was something I did wrong, but I'm guilty of this. You
didn't do anything wrong, Ian.
I had a very specific view on the way I wanted our teams to play, and probably every coach would say that, but I was
100%.
But I was, I was very specific. It was very defined, and ultimately, as I said, there's going to be disappointment, or people, might not agree with your decisions, and my answer was, well, this player, aside from the data driven stuff that you guys just talked about, my answer quite honestly would be, this player fits how we want to play. And so if you are picking a team, Aaron, and Mike and I are picking a team, that team isn't guaranteed to be the same team. Even if we were using similar criteria.
Absolutely not.
So I'm interested in how you handle that situation, because I did that, and I'm not sure, again, I'm not sure you always satisfy everyone's, dissatisfaction, but or concerns. But at the end of the day, there was this kind of, I don't want to call it gray area, but there was an area that said, this is, we expected our defensemen to be mobile, handle the puck, and that was the engine of our team. So that there's an example. How did you deal with that one?
Oh man. So to me, that question and this conversation it sparks is this is why it's so important for all the association to get people together,
right,
to share these ideas, right? So this isn't the only way to do it. This is the example this is what we did. Is one, with the technology, you can weight certain criteria, meaning that if you want a team that you're like, hey, being competitive is really important to me.
Yes.
Then if the final score that pops up and it's communicated to the parents, like, so we can say, hey, if you're playing U18 or midget, the coaching staff for the AAA team has told us that these areas are important. So the score is going to be weighted a little bit more in these areas. So everybody's on the same page. 2, what we did is we would say, let's say the roster has 15 skaters.
Yeah.
And so we would say that, hey, the top 10 players based on the evaluations, they get into the working group and they're on the team. They're on the team because of how they performed in tryouts.
Okay.
Now, we're going to take another 10 skaters in the scores, and those 10 skaters, it's up to the coach based on the working group, exhibition games, etc.
Right.
The coach has the discretion to pick which 5 he feels fit in best with the group. And you could obviously massage that however you wanted, but again, it was all transparent to the parents. And at sometimes the end result was, hey, the coach wanted this player better. But what it didn't allow the coach to say, well, I really think the player that ranked 30th in the group, that's the player I want. It kind of took that out of it because we all know what a spicy meatball that can be.
No, that's that's a great use of both what you've communicated up front, what your program is about, what you're looking for, and then you're using the evaluation process and certainly how defined it is. That marries both together. That's excellent. So here's another one for you guys, because Mike did talk about setting up your ice and everything. So I learned this one kind of the hard way one time, but it was a great learning experience. We weren't situated directly in the middle of the ice. So there was a lot of kids on the ice. So we had broken into stations and then probably doing some kind of small area game, in that session, so we could keep as many players active and moving as possible. But where we were positioned, we were probably, positioned more towards one end of the rink versus another. And it's parents notice, and their feeling is, well, these players where you were down closer to, they got more, stage time.
Looks.
Yeah, looks. Exactly. So like there's a simple one that, like, again, so there's a simple little, fix that you can just make sure so the fix is either make sure you're in the middle of the ice, or make sure that the players are, that you're rotating ends and switching, just as part of your, your ice setup, and your guys running the ice, how important they are, right? Because then you can say, yeah, let's make sure we get this group down to this end, so everyone gets, as Mike says, a good look. I don't know if you call that a hack or what, but
I think it's critical, and I'll throw another one in there. Like, we had our benches. One of our benches had a beam in the middle,
right?
So during the scrimmage games, a lot of parents said, well, hey, we got to redo this because the coach couldn't clearly see the one zone from where he was standing. And it's funny, but it's also, again, it's that bandwidth, right?
Sure.
So if you can get ahead of this stuff and plan your ice times accordingly to ensure you try and avoid any of that, subjective views on how the evaluations are done, I think that's, super, super important. I think another thing along those lines, and this happens to me all the time when I do player evaluations. I don't know why it is, but I ultimately, every time I look at my page, I'm like, man, I've got 3/4 of the kids, but I can't find the other quarter on the ice. I don't see them. So I think if you can structure your ice time to say, hey, we're going to put the kids in certain groups and tell the evaluators that, hey, watch one, don't try and watch everything, watch one group at a time,
right?
And give yourself an opportunity to get some notes on every player, because, like I said, I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, but for me, that happened all the time. It's like, there's 10 minutes left in the ice time and you're like, shoot, I got to try and scramble and find these kids. And when it's just a big sort of practice soup out there, sometimes that can be challenging.
Very much so. And you get the kids that tuck their pennies in, or they put it on inside out. They don't have the number showing.
Totally. Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah.
Always trying to, you're scrambling. I mean, Ian and I, when we first started doing evaluation, we did our best to scan the ice. We would be moving around. We put, if we had step counters, we probably would have put 20,000, 25,000 steps on a tryout, because we'd be up and down the rink, we'd be moving around. And then, we figured out the key to it was just like get our on ice people to do it for us. And we just set up our tryouts in a way that, the stations allowed a flow through. So goalies were moving counterclockwise, players were moving clockwise. And
smart, yeah.
You saw every kid like from where you were seated. And a lot of times, like Ian and I did a lot of our chatting on evaluations. Like a lot of it wasn't at the trial while it was going on. A lot of the time you see, that, that board seating where you have 5 or 10 coaches just sitting there in one place. Everyone's got their evaluation book out and open, and it's just like a stare on out onto the ice where, we tried to split up. I would go down to one end and I would look at a totally different drill than what Ian was watching. And, then you would reconvene and you'd have those discussions. Oh, I saw this, but I saw it like in this situation, there was this going on. So I think it's beneficial for sure. And, perception is everything. Parents are watching, they're almost watching you more than they are watching their player go through the evaluation skate to see how you're reacting. What are you writing? You look at your notebook. Are you happy? Are you upset? So did you pay attention when they scored or, made that great play? So perception is everything during evaluations for sure.
No, I think that's a great point. And I guess maybe the next stage then, fellas, is you get to the player releases. And I know from my experience, I came from a background of coaching college and junior kids, and I didn't anticipate, I guess, the Midas touch required to talk to young kids about. And I can remember sitting in the room the first time, and we had this rule where there had to be a board member or somebody from our hockey committee in the room at all times. And I remember watching those first few kids come in. I'm like, oh my God, like they think they're sitting down with Kyle Dubas. Like that's in their mind, and that's not wrong. They care, they're passionate, and they're like, this is a big moment for them. And so we went through the process, and we had our Adam, or I guess U11, we call it Adam A2 coach at the time. He was a school teacher. And so I watched all of our other coaches do their best with the evaluations, and then the school teacher does his. And I was like, oh my God. So his name was Ted. I pulled Ted. I said, hey, Ted, like, I need you to talk before we do any more of these player releases. Like, we're going to have a meeting, and I need you to get up at the front of the room and tell everybody kind of how you've been educated in this, because you did such a great job of it. And that was really, really valuable. But I would say, like, don't miss that step. Like, make sure, and it should be consistent. Like, equip your coaches, because it's hard on the kids. It's also hard on the coaches. Like, nobody enjoys that. It's not an easy conversation.
No. Before you go there, like, I always think about Moneyball, Aaron, right? Right, players getting traded, and he says, don't sugarcoat it, just say thanks. Traveling secretary.
Somebody in the travel department's going to call you. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, it's clean, but these are kids, and this comes into that, the handoff, if you can do that, the soft landing, that part of it, again, having someone else in there with you. I think that's crucial. At the same time, the kid, after you say either you made it or you didn't make it, I'm not sure they hear anything else after that either, though. So you're kind of balancing both off. So now you're really speaking more to the parent, I'm guessing at that point, Mike, before you go, I can tell you, just my eldest son, Brendan, when we first did tryouts when I was coaching, I would have the line of kids up, after tryouts, and this isn't that long ago, but it would be the kids. It would be only the kids. Well, when Mike and I coached more recently, the lineup was with the parent. Like, there was a time where we just met with the kid. And that those times are gone. So there's a message to the player, to the kid, but then there's also obviously a message that the parents got to understand, or at least be communicated to.
Yeah. And I mean, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say that, like, you're going to have this conversation and the player and the family is going to hear one thing: you made it, you didn't make it. And then everything after that is like, it's almost a little Garfield. But I mean, I think it has to be clear. It has to be concise. Like, be direct.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a 15-minute conversation with the athlete. You know, my biggest thing when we had those conversations, I provide feedback. I provide, you know, my decision, and then, like, I'd open the door. Like, hey, we can have a conversation. The conversation doesn't end here. If you have questions, if you go home and think about stuff, or you want to have another discussion, you have my contact info. Reach out. I will have that conversation, but don't shy away from it. I know, like Aaron, you said it. It is probably and arguably the hardest part of a coach's job, especially at the minor hockey level, volunteer. And, you know, you obviously know more than the 17 players that make your team. So, like, there's connections there that it makes things tough, that those conversations aren't easy. But it goes back to what we were speaking to. If the process is clear, it's communicated, like, it makes that conversation easier, because you have everything in front of you. It's laid out. You know that the family knows the expectations. You have the ability to speak to those expectations and provide your feedback based on what you saw over the last 3 to 5 skates, whatever that may be. And I think, you know, Ian talked about us looking for players that fit a certain team structure, but like that to me was never, like, we never used that as our reason of, you know, we don't see you being able to play in our team structure. It would be something, you know, you're not mobile as a defenseman. You don't, your skating ability is low, or, you know, our forwards, we were always asked them to come back deep into the zone and things like, you know, you don't have the ability to open pivot, and that is imperative for you to be able to have that skill to be able to fit within how we want to play. So those types of things help the conversation. They're not going to ease the conversation. It's not going to make it easier or better, but it at least provides some tangibles to the family. And then, like I said, you can always have that conversation, additional conversations with them after the tryouts and that process is over.
No, I agree. And again, just from, like, you know, personal experience, where we kind of landed was we just made sure that going into those meetings that every player had one thing, and we kept it at one thing that they could improve upon. But I think the best advice that I got, just as a reminder, is that at the end of the day, you know, the adults have their own agendas, but for the kids' goal through all this is to belong somewhere and to feel valued.
Yeah.
And if you can just bring the conversation back that and say, hey, we've got a report. If you want to see what your child can work on, or the kid wants to see that, it's in the report, you can get it. And to your point, Mike, if you want to have a conversation about that, I'm available tomorrow or the next day or whatever. But for the 45 seconds we have in this room, it's the person talking on behalf of the team or association. Their job is to say, hey, if it's not working out here, here's why you're going to be a great fit where you go next. Here's why you're going to be valued. Here's the opportunity you have. And if I think if you keep the focus on that, then at least it makes a tough conversation maybe a little bit easier. And I think that at the end of the day, again, kids they just want to make friends and feel like they belong somewhere. So, but it's
Aaron,
a challenge.
Aaron, you know what though? I completely agree with what you're saying. I think there's also a point where, players want to play at the highest level or on the top team or whatever the case may be. But a coach's responsibility is also is where do you feel that player is gonna have success and then feel good about themselves. Maybe take on a different role. And I can tell you, you know, we released a player, especially a player who was on your team previously, right? So they played with you, and now you're releasing them. They're going down to the next team. Very difficult, but I can tell you, and it happened more than once where the player went down, was the man, like took on a different role, got to handle the puck a little more, maybe had a little more time and space, confidence grew. And they either ended up having a great season and or came back up, in subsequent years. And Now I'll say this: I've never had a parent come to me and say, that was the right decision. But I can look back. I can look back at
makes two of us
at a few players that I know in my heart it was, and it benefited them, and it was some short term pain for some long term gain. So those scenarios are out there as well when you're not just looking out for your team, but you're looking out for where we think that player is going to be best.
It's a great point.
Best suited, big picture.
Yeah.
You know what, Ian, and just to wrap that is like part of that conversation a lot of times is, we'll have you up, we'll work with you, right. You'll be part of the team, still get the, like, coaches need to understand that like that is gold to a player when, like, if you've said that to a player, actually mean it and include them in your plans
and do it.
Bring them out to practice. Do it. Like, don't use it as a easy way to soften that conversation. Use it because it's going to be beneficial to their development as an athlete and a player within that association structure.
Yeah, the worst thing you can do is say you're going to, we call it AP, affiliated player, Aaron, right? So they're
this is great. I know where you're going. It's great.
Yeah, so the worst thing you can do is say we're going to have you up as an AP, and then you don't do it. Because like Mike said, you've got them right. You've got them there. You've explained it to them. They understand or they've accepted it. But here's here's the carrot. We're gonna we want you to still be part of our group. We will have you out to practice games when possible. But if you say it, you got to do it. You have to follow through.
I think honestly that might be the best advice that comes out of here, Ian. And I think I would summarize it as just if in association, if you're talking to your coaches at the start of the season, if you tell them one thing, like just remind them that their words matter and they're going to be heard and you can't take them back. Once they're out of your mouth, they count. So be really careful what words you use and the commitments you make. And I think that's such a great point. Fellas, so I'd like to know this. What are your thoughts? So we've got the player evaluations. What are your thoughts on year-end evaluations, be it kind of revisiting some of the drills and skills you worked on, you evaluated players on? And, I this is just my personal belief, and I'm open for debate on it, but I know that a lot of associations might have a rule that says, hey, like, if a player is moving up to an age level, that they don't want the previous coach to be part of the evaluations because they may have some sort of bias. And I know we're all worried about that. And, But I do think, like, at some time, like, one way an association, this is my personal view, can let parents know that their conduct and how they interact within the team environment is going to matter, is to say, hey, there's going to be year-end evaluation. So that's going to see, the players improve in specific areas. As an association, we can see, if we're moving in the right direction from a player development and technical standpoint, but also for a coach to put on a report that says, hey, like, there was a lot of challenges here. And it's important that, the next person, knows about that and can admire that. And the parents know that, hey, like, if you're going to act out of line, it's not going to die with this season. It's going to be documented, and it's up to the next coach to how much weight they're going to put into that. But at least they can have that feedback. And that, again, that's my personal view, that's one way an association can provide a little bit of accountability.
Yeah, I would say they're like as important, could be sometimes more important, depending on how your season went and what the culture of your group was like off the ice for the next season and setting that season up for success. I also think, like, there needs to be more than start a season, end a season, because like, hockey's a long year. It's 10 months at times, and if you've gone through evaluations, you've made the team, and your next touch point is in 10 months. Well, you said it earlier, Aaron, like, kids grow in 3 months so much, and they develop so much in 3 months, but they haven't got feedback in that 10-month time frame and said, I got to do this, this, and this to set me up for success at the end of the season, or get, advance at the end of the season. It's a long window to not hear on anything, whether positive or negative, on what needs to be worked on and what you're doing well at. It at least gives some and some context to the season and why things are going certain ways, or maybe why they're playing in a certain position or on a certain line. And it really adds some data behind what you are doing as a team and where that player fits within that team. But I think, outside of hockey, any job you leave, you kind of leave some kind of handoff document to the next person. And
bingo.
Like it might be, sometimes it might not be positive. Sometimes it might be like, I never wanted to leave this job, but I had to, whatever it is. And it's excellent. And I think, it's up to the coach or the person in charge of the next evaluation, or the head coach of the next team to, decide what they want to take from it. They're going to have criteria, but it really goes back to, like, if the association has a plan and the criteria is consistent, then there's not really a way to challenge that if it's set out from the get-go. Because then that coach can say, well, the plan hasn't changed much. We're still working towards this as an association, and this doesn't really fit that, but this does. So that's how I'm basing my decisions at the next stage of evaluations. But I think feedback is important to the athletes, especially at the minor level, because they change and develop so quickly, and they, like, a 6-month window is a long period of time. 10, 12, 14-year-old life, right? Like they have 6 months, they can change so drastically, develop so much. So I think that constant feedback formalized is key.
Yeah. I mean, Aaron, I really like Mike's, workplace analogy. We have, as Mike said, when you're leaving a position, you have that wrap up, but even during your work year, you've got performance appraisal, right? And that formalizes, what you've been working on. And as we often say, like, there should be no surprises really during a performance appraisal. It's just a summary of what, the kind of consistent ongoing feedback that you would be giving. Right. But I know we would like to do a sit down with the player and their parent, depending on the age, whether it was just in the new year, Mike, or before playoffs started. So it was a good way to give some feedback, but also kind of gear up where we were going over the next 2 months or 3 months, that sort of thing. So, and then have your again at the end of the season as well. But I really found that touch point at the middle or just past halfway of the season was a big one as well.
Yeah, and I would just build off that. Can you imagine if you were a coach? And again, I think in a lot of cases this is where technology just adds some efficiencies, I guess. But if you got your roster for this year and you look back on each player, and the previous coach said, Ian learns better when you talk to him one-on-one privately, and Michael learns better when you put him at the front of the line, or when you bring him around the whiteboard. Make sure that Michael's not in the back, because we discovered that Michael doesn't see that. Well, no, seriously, because Michael, like, his eyes, he can't wear his glasses on the ice, so it's better if he's at the front. And if you had that feedback, how great would that be for the coaches to kind of hand that off? And I think that there's just this all goes back to the first point I think that was made here, was the importance of communication, sharing information, and keeping everything transparent. Fellas, just as we close here, I just wonder if each of you can provide some tips for both players and parents through this process. And we'll start with you, Michael.
That's a great question. I think, like, players have to come in to an evaluation. One, they have to be prepared for themselves, and whatever that means to that player. Like, if you got to feel confident, you got to feel like you want to do this. You got to understand what you're getting into. Like I said just now, like 10 months is a long time to commit to something, especially as interests change, life changes. Like, so you got to be ready for that and what hockey brings. But come in, work hard, don't feel pressure. It's still minor hockey. There's lots of life in front of you, and you have the opportunity to develop, and you're there, hopefully reaching a goal, and if not, it's going to be okay. And there's next year, and you can work towards things that you want you want to work towards. It's what you're going to put into it as much as what you're going to get out of it, right? So I think there's that aspect. I think for parents, I think, it's not the focal point of your child's life is this evaluation period, and it doesn't have to be the most stressful thing you ever go through as a parent. I think there's going to be a lot of other things that take more importance than, that single A, double A, triple A, whatever that team is. That moment, I know it's stressful at the time, but looking back, especially if you talk to parents that have, moved on from the game and are no longer have kids in minor hockey, they'll tell you that, things that got blown out of proportion or that were stressful moments in their experience in minor hockey, like they're almost like, I can't believe that was such a big deal looking back on things now and what we're dealing with in life. So I think those are some things that need to happen, but like have conversations. Don't sit back and get surprised either as a player or as a parent. Like if you want to understand the process, talk to the association, have a conversation with the coach. The coach, for the most part, every evaluation process I've gone through with my teams or even just been a part of and been around the rink, like the coach is available. They usually are the first person you see coming into the rink. It's the coach that's going to be making those decisions. And if you have a question, ask it, understand the process so there are no surprises, at the end of it. And now that's a shock factor. And now it's a way bigger deal. And it didn't have to be like that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Ian.
Okay. I got two cliches and a quick example. Okay. So one cliche.
Spoken like a true coach.
Yes. So the first one is it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? So as Mike was talking about this minor hockey experience, it's a continuum. People are going to grow at different times. People are going to, you might have, kind of the early, success versus people that come or come to the sport a little later. So that's one. Just see it as a longer term, right? And Aaron, we talked last time about enjoying the moment, right? So that there's a general. But really see it as a longer term journey. And then I think for both the player and the parent, control what you can control, right? The player can control their effort, their listening, their attitude. Like you say, are they attentive? Are they watching what the drill is so they know what it is? So there's nothing worse than being first in line and not knowing what the drill is, right? So control what you can control. And I think the parent can too. The parent can control, okay, we're going to tryouts, do what you do best, enjoy yourself, right? Like not create an environment where we're creating too much anxiety for the player. So I think and even if the parent's feeling the anxiety, not to push that onto the player before they step on the ice. So that's certainly something I would, I think both can take on. So the last one was the quick story, coaching young players. Someone's always watching. Well, I guess you could say that about any player, right, Aaron? Someone's always watching. So to Mike's point about coaches being there early at the rink, they notice if the bag's getting carried in by the player or by the parent. It's little things. It's little things like that. Right. We did it.
I think that's amazing. That's such a great point. And I'm going to close on this. Just some advice for parents. And that is this. It's like when you get in the car for the car ride home.
Yeah.
Don't tell your son or daughter what happened. Ask them what happened. Ask them what they thought. Because here's the thing. Kids, it's not lost on kids where they fit in. Like right. if a kid really, if they know that there was, 20 kids on the ice and they were in the bottom quarter in the skating drill, they know that. Like the kid's not going to say, "Oh, I thought I was a real burner out there today."
Right.
And parents need to take that information and ask them. If the kid's like, "I thought I did okay, but man, I thought the other kids were a little bit faster," or "I thought, I struggled, touching the puck in the scrimmage, etc." Like that is, as a parent, that is your number one barometer of where your child fits into the group, and you need to put some stock into that, and you need to accept it. And to both the points you made, it's not the end of the world. Right. There's a lot of things for all of us to be good at. So, boys, I'll tell you what, this might be the best podcast we've ever done. I think there was so much value in there for all stakeholders, coaches, administrators, parents, and to everybody listening. Hope that was valuable. I learned a lot, and this was fun. Mike, we're gonna have to get you back on, man.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me.
Big Mike.
No, that's all good. Big Mike, that's right. Well, hey, fellas, I know that the player evaluation process isn't completed yet, so best of luck to the two of you as you navigate your role in that, and to all the coaches and administrators and parents listening out there, best of luck to you as well. And let's make sure we're setting ourselves up for a great season ahead.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. Brilliant.